Welcome everyone to Hazard, Vulnerability and Capacity Analysis. Today we'll talk about what exactly is hazard, how vulnerable you are, and how can you build capacity to fight those hazardous situations as such. So yes, the agenda is simple. We will try to distinguish different between different types of hazards, probably explain the hazard assessment at the very local level, uh, how do we assess vulnerability? How do we study vulnerability? How do we understand vulnerability, or how vulnerability has been interpreted as, and to understand the capacity, the concept of it, and the various tools to build capacity, to understand how at the local community level we can build capacity to fight any kind of adverse situation per se. So, talking about hazard, it is an event or probably an occurrence that is unwarranted, that has potential to cause injuries on mass scale, in fact even death on a large scale. Definitely it includes damaging of property, and in the long run there is an ecological imbalances, the environmental gets changes forever, there is a marked difference. So hazard is an event which is unwarranted, is an occurrence which we do not like it, because it threatens life, it threatens property, it threatens the very environment where it is hashtag. Purpose of the assessment, what hazard assessment, is to specify the nature and behavior of the potential hazard, what kind of impact it can have. That is what we are looking around it, the threat that the people are going to face, the loss of life that it might go around it. If there are no loss of life, is there a loss of livelihood per se? So you need to understand it is not only medical or livelihood or a life, it is psychological, it is economical, it is sociological, in fact it is even cultural threats that the community faces. So basic major types of uh, hazard perspective, what are we looking out here? It is earthquake, it is flood, it is epidemic, it is industrial hazard, droughts, hailstorm, pest attached, the locust infestation, the conflict. And the conflict may not be only man versus man, it can be man versus animal, and so on and so forth. So yes, major hazard known as earthquake, floods, epidemic, that is what we should be looking forward to it. Industrial hazard, droughts, hailstorms, pest attached as the conflict can be talking around here. Now that is what we need to go around. The possibility of new hazard or of climate change, with the increasing temperature of our planet, the glaciers are melting, the overall level of sea is rising. So then is the economic situation. Did I say about livelihood? Yes, the livelihood of certain people changes altogether. In fact, the sustenance of a community is put through a question. The industrialization, the rampant industrializations, what does it goes around it? Does it poison our environment? Probably it does. Social unrest, definitely the gaps between people who has and who does not have, and that is what we are looking forward to. New form of epidemic in terms of AIDS, bird flu, etc., if we go around here, and that is what we need to understand time and again. One hazard causing a secondary hazard. What are we looking at? We are talking about floods. Now, what does flood leads to? It leads to the spread of malaria, waterborne diseases. It leads to an increase in snake bite. Why? Because the residents of snakes, the rodents, are filled with water. They have to take shelter in humanitarian places where human beings are living. So they have to take a boat. Now that is what the other side effects of uh, disaster is all about it, or emergency situation is all about it. One hazard does lead to another disaster. We talk about droughts. What does drought leads to? Drought leads to lack of food, lack of water. That means our immune system as a human being goes on a lower scent. That means there is an increased chances of epidemic and definite chance of famine per se. Earthquake, with earthquakes we have landslides. Landslide means there is a complete connection of roads. You have the road connection, and the road connection filters down because of the landslide. The industrial disaster can happen because of the chemical spillages and so on and so forth. There would be rampant fire here and there in the commercial places, even in the residential high-rise building, because of earthquake. The earthquake will lead to short circuit of electrical appliances will lead to fire. We have civil wars. Civil wars are all about causing infighting between mankind because of different principle that everybody vouches for. So that leads to refugees, that leads to displacement of people, that leads to epidemics. So yes, one hazard caused to the secondary hazard, as in flood, droughts, earthquake, and civil war are the primary hazard. The epidemics, snakebite, famine, landslide, industrial disasters, refugees, displacement are your secondary hazard per se. So yes, factors to be considered in understanding the nature and the behavior of the hazard. What are the factors which creates results in a hazard? Is it natural? If it is natural, probably you cannot avoid it. Probably you can develop an early warning system. The other question, if it is not natural, is it man-made? Is it induced by man? Can we prohibit it? Can we prevent it? So what are my warning signs? What are my warning signals? Scientific and indigenous indicators that hazard is likely to occur. Forewarning, time gap between warning signs and impact of hazard, as the case might be. And that is very important for you to understand. Factors to consider is understanding the nature and behavior of hazard. Forces, factors that make power of hazard. Example, intensity and magnitude of earthquake, speed of onset, rapidity of arrival and impact, as the case might be. The frequency, how frequently it is happening over a period of time, time-related pattern that goes around it. So yes, there are three aspect. One is of that force, next is of the velocity of the speed of the onset, and the third one will be how frequent it is, all about it. So you need to understand those three concepts of force, velocity, or speed, if I say so, and frequency of the event, unwarranted event, disaster waiting to happen. Then comes the seasonality and duration. Seasonality almost is like a frequency. It's every occurrence at a particular period of time. Let's say during a rainy season, there is a chances of flooding happens, increases. Chances of earthquake happening increases. So that's the seasonality. Duration, hazard presence on a time scale for how long the earthquake persists. If there are violent tremors which is felt over 24 hours, over 48 hours, so it becomes a bit of a dangerous situation that needs to be understood. If it is raining continuously, if it is snowing continuously, you need to understand for how many days, how many weeks it is going around. The duration plays an important role in understanding the nature and the behavior of the hazard per se. So yes, I will give you certain things as a matrix for hazard. In case if it is a flood, the origin is rainwater, definitely overflow. The rain, the rainfall duration, intensity, quantity, speed of the wind, if the rivers are overflowing, and how do we come across those overflowing rivers. Warning signs, you need to understand. Then forewarning is relatively short, but can vary from few hours to few days. You can plan it out. In fact, the onset of typhoon or hurricanes or any kind of tsunamis, there are stable warning approximately over a period of days. It can go around it. Speed of the onset can often be predicted a few days in advance. Frequency is it seasonal or not? Seasonality depends on the wet or the monsoon season. Duration, is it depending for how long it is going to happen, for days, for months, for weeks, and so on and so forth. That can needs to be understood. So origin and cause of hazard. For flood, it is the origin and cause is the river overflowing or the coastal rising of the water. Drought is the deficit of rainfall over a period of time. Epidemic is a rise of a parasitic infection that happens due to an exposure or a toxin with the human species. Earthquake is shaking of the earth by the waves of below the earth surfaces, as the case might be. Some important point that needs to be understood. This is what we need to understand is the statistical data that can be developed. If we can have some sense of forewarning signal that can be interpreted as things yet to happen, and that is what we look forward to. Approach other knowledgeable sources of people, understand the various intensity of the same hazard, as the case might be. That needs to be understood. So look at the scientific and statistical data, approach the other knowledgeable sources of people, and so on and so forth. Understand the various intensity of the same hazard, if I may say so. We talk about the hazard map. If you go around it, you look what is this. There's a map, and then there is the seismic zone which has been parked around here, and let you tells you what kind of maps we are looking at into it. So we have a hazard map. We can have a historical profile also as to what kind of dangerous thing, natural calamities or man-made calamities have been happening in which particular area. The seasonal calendar, perhaps, if we can generate some sense of sequences, some sense of algorithm to predict the occurrence of natural disaster, that is what half the battle would be won. This is what we are supposed to look forward to. That needs to be understood time and again, every moment. So the vulnerability of people would be how do it goes around it, and that needs to be understood time and again, every moment that we say so. Now this is what we are shaking around here. So vulnerability is the set of prevailing and of the consequential things and comes around it, conditions which is adversely affecting the people ability to prevent, people ability to fight it out, people ability to prepare for and respond accordingly to the hazardous situation. It is how likelihood that I can spring back to my natural life as and when on basis, and that is what we are talking around it. This is the cause, this is the definition that we go around here. So identifying what elements are at risk and what are the root causes that needs to be found out. That is what we will be talking around here time and again. Now, types of vulnerability, how do we go around here? If we say so, what happens? Is it the physical material voices that comes around? And if so, how come it is there? Now, physical and material choices, if it is disadvantageous positions to your property, if it damages your property, that is what we are looking into, is the types of vulnerability. Your place of residence might be getting destroyed, or probably the minerals or any industrial product or the industry completely gets wiped out. Now these are vulnerabilities that threatens the community at large. So what are the social and organizational? Did I say about the industry? Yes. Did I say about the society? The society might get broken down altogether. Why? Because if it is a flood, and if the flood happens in a farming season, in a farming community, the livelihood of the full community goes for a toss. Attitudinal and motivational, definitely yes. This is one of the major sub causes of disaster, where people get wrecked mentally, if not physically, wrecked psychologically. Now, this is the destruction that we need to understand, because it has consequences, and consequences are latent in nature. It's not visible upfront, and probably only after the passage of time. The time passage would be anything around from 10 days to 10 years. That is what we are looking into it. So, attitudinal, motivational. So these are the types of vulnerability. Apart from it, what are the tools that can be allowed to map around here? Is the social mapping, is the resource mapping, is the gender analysis, and is the secondary analysis. There are four things that needs to be taken into consideration: social mapping, resource mapping, gender analysis, and secondary analysis per se. So capacity assessment. Capacity is the strength and resources which are present in an individual, present in a community, present in a household. My strength might be my economic likelihood. I might be having a money power. I might have a reserve of gold. I might have a very good connections. I might be well connected with people in and around. I might have the best of the technology at my disposal. I might have the best of the resources at my disposal to fend off any sort of calamities for per se. This is what I can require, utilize to prevent, to mitigate, to prepare to cope up with certain disaster. And that is what capacity assessment is all about. It is the network, it is the resources, it is the economic power, it is the technology that comes around it. That needs to be a certain time and again. So what are we looking in terms of physical? It can be cash. Did I say money power, economic power? It can be land. It can be tool. It can be food. It can be access to credit. Well network. If I'm well network as a community, I have the money funding coming in. If it is a social organization, it's all about network. It is all about your support system. It is all about your family. It is how well netted the societies are, is at local level, at state level, at a welfare institutional. Attitudinal and motivation is a sense of control and the power, the capabilities that one has within him or within the community, the sense of power of owning up a problem and probably working towards the solutions thereby. So understanding the people previous experiences with hazard enables them to develop coping strategies as to what has happened in history and how do we go ahead with it. Analyzing which resources are available and used by community to reduce risk. who has access to these resources and who controls them. Through capacity assessment, the community coping strategies and resources which are available for disaster preparedness, mitigation, and preventions are need to be identified time and again, if I may say so. Tools for capacity assessment, I have already stated it, is your social mapping, as in what kind of people, what are the demographic, what are the gender balances, what are the education level, the social levels, the social mapping, the resource mapping is what are the facilities that are at your disposal, be it the technology, be it the minerals, be it the factories, be it the economic wealth, be it the network. Then comes the gendered resource mapping as to who can contribute to the society, to the welfare of the society, who can make the differences in bringing the whole community life back to the normal. And definitely you just cannot undermine wealth, the wealth ranking of the position. With this, I come to an end of this presentation. I hope everybody has understood what we were talking about in this video. Thank you for watching it till the end.